Hey, it's James from 4x4 Earth, and welcome to track 44 of the 4x4 Earth podcast, Going Off-Road with Roothy.
Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the second part of our interview with Roothy, Australia's most famous four-wheel driver, and we're going to talk today about the importance of getting out off-road and what the future is for track closures and, more importantly, track openings. That's something that we're both really passionate about. Where do you think that we're heading, and what do we need to do better to make sure that we can transition away from track closures and start thinking about track openings?
Wow, that's $1 million question, and I know because I'm plugged into this network that gives me feedback from all over the country that there is a slight change in the wind. That's the best way to describe it. And, well, you're in the CMF, so you understand about people who put their lives on the line for this country. And we have, all over Australia, we have returning servicemen, guys that have done their time overseas. 9 times out of 10, they'll come back and just want to go camping in the bush. I know just from the letters I used to receive or the emails, and we used to send four-wheel drive action DVDs and magazines to our troops overseas in the Middle East and all the rest of it. And they'd say, we put that DVD on and all the boys in the platoon watched it, and or the whole company saw it, and it just made us think of Australia. And when we get back, we just can't wait to get that peace and quiet. So you get people like that who, as far as I'm concerned, have a right to access anything Australia's got to offer, whether it's healthcare, education, or the freedom of the tracks. And with all the rest of us going, look, there are too many stresses involved in city living to not have that sort of stress relief of being able to pack the family up and go bush in the four-wheel drive. And that, we're a nation of campers. We camped the first day Captain Phillip set up his tent city down in Sydney Harbour. We've been campers all the way through. To me, it's a vital part of our anatomy as Australians, I guess. And I know I've always been pushing the barrow because I started late in the kids' stakes. My youngest is only 17. My middle boy, Tom, just came back from a camping trip on Stradbroke. Took one of our troopies, actually. My youngest son is getting his licence as we speak, I hope. And he'll want to do the same thing. My daughter, she and her boyfriend like to go camping in the bush. This generation, it's up to us, the older guys, and I'm talking my generation, we're the guys who are supposedly running this bloody country. It's up to us to hold that open as long as we can and in fact expand it against those who would shut the tracks down. How do we do that? All of us just keep pushing. Just do what you can, wherever you can, whenever you can. Make the case that you're a four-wheel driver, that you love your country and you need it kept open.
Well, it's interesting what you talk about with guys coming back from and girls coming back from overseas. We interviewed a guy called Marcus Nash, who he runs a program that's for people with PTSD, for police, AMBOs, and ADF members, and it's around getting them out bush, getting them...
I've heard of Marcus,
yeah. Does a cracking good job.
Yes.
And I've spoken to some of the people who've been through his program, and it's literally saved lives. There was people who I spoke to who said that they were ready to top themselves, and it was just going out off-road enabled them to put things into a completely different context, and they came back changed people.
Yes. Yep. And I think that experience, more and more... Look, I don't know. You could get into all sorts of weird stuff with this, or I can, because my brain's a little weird anyway on a good day. But I believe that all people have some sort of connection to country, okay? Doesn't matter whether we've been here 100 years, 200 or 200,000. And even with that country thing, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we evolved in the bush. Humankind is essentially a monkey walking upright to some degree. to not get out of the city, to get away from the concrete and get out into the bush occasionally is to deprive some part of your brain from something that it really needs. And so that peace and quiet, how many people can't really tell you why they love going bush, they just do. I see it constantly. I see people with high-pressure jobs in the city who've cracked psychologically. You run into them riding a push bike up the New England Highway or doing something totally bloody loopy, really. But basically what they're doing is getting themselves back in touch with the bush. And, you can imagine how it would be in a situation, Afghanistan or something like that, where you're not only getting to see the odd person in bits, a mate of yours, but you're also dealing with all the backlashes of that. I had my generation, I missed out on Vietnam by a year, and we lived through that on the telly, and so many of my mates, elder brothers, whatever, were involved in it. The first guy I worked with on Fraser Island was a sergeant who'd done 3 trips over there, and listening to his stories when he sort of knocked over a few 4X long necks, I could understand why when he came back, there was no way he could go back to his job in a city accountancy firm and why he chose to be a driller in the bush, just because he couldn't find peace anywhere else. We're lucky, mate. We've already found it, and it's a great grounding exercise for us, but spread the word.
That's it. There's nothing like sleeping out under the stars. They're so much brighter when you're out in the bush. And I always say one of my favourite sayings is you meet the nicest people sitting around a campfire.
Well, quite often that's the only time you meet people on a real level. Most other situations, there's some other scenario involved. It's business meetings or education meetings or religious meetings or whatever the meetings are. There's another scenario going on. When you're just sitting around a campfire, maybe waiting for a roast or having a couple of drinks, whatever you're doing, that's when the truth comes to the surface and the deep secrets come out and people really do get plugged into each other. You're right, you do meet the nicest people.
So are you seeing anything exciting on the front of track openings? Are you seeing councils who are trying to generate more four-wheel drivers into their local area yet, or do we still have more work to do on that?
Oh, look, we can never let up on that, okay? That's the first part. It's one of the biggest shames, I guess, from my point of view, is the number of people, especially in the early days, who didn't realise this was going on, who didn't see the tracks closing, because as far as they were concerned, okay, there's a gate there, we just keep going till the next place where there's not a gate. But now, I think right across the board, most of us have realised that we need to make a little bit of noise on a constant basis. When something gets shut down, start asking people why. It's amazing how many times it's been shut down because one person made a decision based on finding a TV and a couple of nappies or something up a track. You push a little bit and quite often the gate opens again. Are we seeing changes? The changes I can see are more to do with things like the Northern Territory now, and they're always easy to shift, the government up there, because it's not a very big state numbers-wise. It certainly is area-wise. It's not a state anyway, it's a territory, but the territory government is very close to the people in the territory. One of the things they realised was everyone's got a four-wheel drive, and half the people who are visiting us are visiting to go four-wheel driving. So all of a sudden, they've started to say, we are the four-wheel drive friendly state. We're opening up this, we're opening up that. And they're working in cooperation with the local four-wheel drive clubs. The whole of the Finke River Gorge can be driven now. You always could, but you had to know the right people to do it. These days, it's on a sign as a four-wheel drive track. Come on through, do this. Don't do it in summer. You'll roast. Try not to do it after it's rained. You might drown, but any other time, go and have a go. There's that kind of attitude is infiltrating South Australia now. We already have the South Australian Tourist Board. In fact, they've spoken to me about doing a couple of things down there just recently, but I know even last year that they were chucking out a whole lot of tourism material on come and four-wheel drive around Robe and the beaches and, come and experience our wonderful bird life and this sort of thing. Once that rock starts to roll, in my mind anyway, you're going to have a lot of trouble stopping it. And so I think we have hit the bottom of the track closure thing and we're starting to climb again. Now, I know you're going to get thousands of people sending you messages saying, Roothy's got it wrong, the track just up the road from us has just shut down or something. I realise that's going on everywhere. And to be honest, a lot of that is just a question of how quickly our population grows and how quickly our major cities are spreading into areas that used to be considered bushland. All of a sudden, when there's 5 guys who've been driving a powerline track on the weekend, and whenever I say guys too, I'm talking to you girls as well. I do apologise for that. But, there's 5 and then suddenly there's 10 and all of a sudden there's 20 or 30 or 40 on a weekend. And then someone decides to go in there and dump some rubbish, usually not even a four-wheel driver. Things start to go until the powerline guys come along and put a lock on the gate. And that's what you get with the spread of civilization, with all the new housing estates taking up all that land, all the rest of it. It's not just the koalas getting displaced, it's the four-wheel drivers too. What happens? You tend to find that more tracks are opened further away to some degree, I mean, where I live in Wynnum, in just south of Brisbane, when I was 17, that was the first time I came up here, I could ride my trail bike for hours in the bush all around here without going anywhere. And just before I spoke to you today, I came back from a ride on the bike out looking at some new tracks, actually, or hopefully there'll be new tracks. And it took me 65 Ks just to get to the place, just to get far enough away from town so that, there was a couple of tracks open. That's in 40-odd years, but that's how quick things can change. I think we can swing it the other way. I think we're never going to get in the high-density areas. It's always going to be a bit of a problem, but I think what we're seeing more and more is people opening up land. We've seen this already in Queensland with a couple of national parks where the rangers have gone, we want to attract people. We need to attract people. If we don't get X number of people camping here, they're going to look at cutting down our staff numbers. And so they start opening up tracks for four-wheel drives. That's happening up around Mackay as I speak. I was talking to a guy this morning about it. So, there's some light on the horizon, James.
Well, I always think that Robe would have to be, that's the perfect example. It's a happening little town. There's a lot of economic activity there. It's not close to anything really, but any long weekend, every second vehicle's got a sand flag on it.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And, when you consider that you can get there via the border track, which is a wonderful drive, and then you can go four-wheel driving up and down the coast, it's just awesome. And Robe itself is just a beautiful little place. Excellent seafood too, just quietly.
Yes, excellent. We love it there.
You've been there a few times, obviously.
A couple of times, yep.
Oh, lovely. Lucky you, yeah. Good thing.
No, glorious. Love a good sand drive.
Yes. Well, I'm lucky. I live in Queensland and we fight hard up here and there's some ridiculous opposition sometimes to driving on beaches. People go, oh, it destroys this. Look at the sand, it's destroyed everything. And they haven't got a bloody clue, because if you live here and you've worked here and you've driven and camped on the beaches, you know that a non-stop convoy of four-wheel drives doesn't do anything like the damage that one good storm does. No one can tell you how long Fraser Island is because it changes by a kilometre or two every year, depending on which way the sand blows. So, yeah, anyway, Mother Nature, she's always stronger than us. That's rule number one of four-wheel driving, I guess.
That's it. I mean, how many, all of the tracks, they disappear, within overnight, don't they?
They do.
A little bit of wind, a little bit of rain, and it's all back to level again, and you're good to go again.
Well, look at the situation in central Queensland at the moment, north central. Most of it's under a few feet of water, and it'll take a while to come back. But people will be looking all over the place for tracks. I can tell you, we'll lose them. It's the same up the Cape. after a good wet, I've done that heaps of times, been first through looking for fresh tracks. That's when all the adventure is, of course, as you guys know. But, by crikey, one wet season, 5 months of rain and a bit of sunshine, the grass grows, all of a sudden you've lost a track. You leave it 2 wet seasons, you never find it again.
Yep.
Awesome.
We put a couple of questions out on Facebook and on 4x4 Earth, and one question that a couple of people were really keen to hear the answer to. 4-wheel drive action. What is the story with leaving 4-wheel drive action? How do you feel about it now?
Oh, okay. How do I feel about giving up the best gig on earth? I guess I could see what was going to happen, and it was pretty obvious. I've been in the magazine business as a writer, photographer, and just as a freelancer, I suppose, for 30 years. And I've seen the best of it. We built 4-wheel drive action up to, at one stage, it was selling over 70,000 copies. That was about our 200th issue. But the guy that owned the company, who also owned 40-odd other magazines, he could see the writing on the wall for magazines. Everyone could, to some degree. And so he decided to turn the best-selling magazine in his stable, which was 4-wheel drive action, and closely followed by Caravan and Motorhome. He decided to go into products because he still had a whole bunch of people who needed employment and money had to come from somewhere. So hence the Super Centre, hence all the King's swags and rooftop tents and all that King's fridges and all the rest of that stuff. I could see that coming, but my choice was after, I suppose at the time, 15, 16 years of subcontracting to them as purely editorial, which is the side of publishing I've always worked on. My choice was to basically stay with them and be promoting gear. I just wasn't too happy about that. I didn't really want to become part of a brochure, if that makes sense.
Yep.
A lot of I've been probably the luckiest bloke on earth. I've had I worked in the bush until I was in my later 30s. I had an absolutely wonderful time. When I came to the city, it was to test motorbikes for a living. I mean, the next thing I was doing was working as a tour guide back in the bush on trail bikes. I got married about then, had kids, wonderful wife, wonderful kids, and I've always spent about 5 or 6 months of the year in the bush, thanks to whatever, 4-wheel driving. And so I guess along the way, I always felt I should put something back in. And the something was to stay honest with products. I've never been involved with anything I didn't like. And if I did, it was a temporary sort of a thing, in as much as I hadn't found out that they popped or whatever they did. And so I always wanted to stay on the sort of Australian-friendly side of things. I mean, I'm about as Aussie as they come, I suppose, and so are you by the sound of your voice. But at the end of the day, James, the whole Super Centre thing, which has worked really well, and Sean and Graham and the other guys, there was a whole lot of reasons. They wanted to step up. I was doing nearly all the outside work. They wanted to step up. I was happy to let them. I was happy to move on. And I was happy to, at that stage too, I could see that the writing was on the wall for a whole lot of people who worked in manufacturing, 4-wheel drive products in Australia, who worked in retailing, just normal floor retailing. A company like the Super Centre their advertising wasn't costing them anything because of 4-wheel drive action and everything else. And they have always, as probably anyone who's listening to this knows, had these amazing prices, I mean, they land stuff into the country and they whack a percentage on it, and you pay a whole lot less through Super Centre, quite often for stuff that's the same calibre. As it started to, I could see that it was going to hurt a whole lot of people in the industry. Now, I didn't want my name attached to that, even though there was a degree of inevitability in it, It's just that I'd been there a long time. I knew people in TJM and ARB, and when I know a company, I know the guys who are polishing the bull bars and welding them together as well as the guys up the top, you know. And I could see that here in Australia, sooner or later, that kind of stuff was going to start happening. It has now come to the stage where it's a flood. And, you know, there's people all over the country who are looking for jobs. But having said that, mate, one of my earliest jobs was working in a mine doing service work as a teenager with a guy who was a qualified wooden propeller maker. And he couldn't believe it when he got put off by the airport because, hey, mate, no one needs a wooden propeller maker anymore. I worry about the future, James. I worry about, you know, from what I've been reading and hearing, and driverless cars and driverless trucks are not that far away in the United States. I can't see that working here in Australia for a long time, but it is inevitable that one day there's going to be big trucks barging around Australia that are computer controlled or something, and that's going to put a lot of people out of work again. Every time this shift in the way the world works happens, people are put out of work. I just didn't want to be responsible for it back in the four-wheel drive action days. And, you know, I still get along fine with all the guys. No issues at all. I miss the fact that we used to work with really creative, really clever people. And I miss the fact that my boss at four-wheel drive action, the guy who owned the company, a bloke called Charles Vella, a lot of people hate him because they reckon he put them out of business. Well, guess what? He was just a smart businessman who saw the writing on the wall. And the other side of it is if you were me, he's about my age, he said to me very early in the piece, he said, listen, John, I'll fight the battles here in the office. You fight them out in the bush. And he said, I don't care. If you get into strife, I'll bail you out. You just do whatever you want, go wherever you want, play the game as hard as you can, and I'll back you up. And he always did. It was a great relationship. But like all good relationships, and I hope the handbrake's not listening, there comes a time when you've got to change things. So so we did. There you go. Is that too long and too involved an answer?
No, well, and it leads on to, so in the forum, there were some people who wanted to know, what do you think the future is going to be of the aftermarket industry? Because it was inevitable that someone was going to do what Supercenter's done. There's a lot of really smart designers and manufacturers in Australia. How do you think the next 10 years are going to go for them? Is there some hope for some niche manufacturers, or do you think they're all going to pack up sooner or later?
Look, there's always going to be room for better product. I have a personal, and this isn't advertising, I'm not paid for them, paid by them. I really like Engel fridges, for instance. I always have done. You know, I remember Malcolm Douglas showing me one 15 years ago that he'd had since the inception of the things that were still running. I got one in Milo that's been under mud and bashed and blah, blah, blah. They cost more to buy. They last longer. It's not an Australian product, but there's a good bunch of Aussies who distribute them. Now, that sounds like a dirty, great big plug for Engel, and a whole lot of people will go, yeah, but I could have bought 3 of these for the price of one of those. Good on you. No problems. But the fact is there are still people who buy Engels, just like there are still people who realise that a Maxtrax is a better product. It's patented as a better product right from the start. So, yeah, go and cut up your milk crate and wire it together and you'll make a decent set of potential treads, but it won't do the same thing and last as long as a set of Maxtrax. So those two instances alone show that there's always room for good product. Is it going to be smaller? Possibly. We're looking at the demise of camper trailer manufacturing in Australia, I reckon, to some degree. But even having said that, there are still people who would rather pay 2 or 3 or 4 times as much to buy something that's possibly 25% better than the Chinese equivalent, you know? There's always a market for good product. What I can see happening, and I've seen it already, is that a lot of the stuff that's sourced from overseas, it took a lot of these people a while to realise that, you know, thanks to people like you, thanks to groups like 4x4 Earth and forums, no one gets away with shit product for very long. So, you know, you could bring in 10,000 plastic snatch traps from Hong Kong that look almost as good as the real thing, sell them dirt cheap. The first time 3 of them bust, people are going to talk about it. And all of a sudden you'll be stuck with 9,500 shitty snatch straps. Things happen very quickly these days. In the old days, you know, an ad had come out in a magazine that would have been bought 3 months before the magazine even showed up. People read things, they leave them sitting around. It takes 3 months for the message to go through. 3 months before you finally need one of that product and buy it. And then you write a letter and you say, hey, it's a piece of shit. And guess what? These days, that whole process can take a week. So, yes, I do believe there's always going to be a future for clever design. If I was a clever designer in Australia, I would take my clever design and patent it and try and get in first. Get it manufactured somewhere, get in first with it, fully aware that sooner or later, thanks to, you know, the lack of patent rules in China, someone's going to copy it. Someone's going to do something with it. Just make yours different, make it better, and keep it under patent. And let's face it, all of this stuff, all of this gear that's going out there, there's always 2 or 3 tiers of quality involved. The top-notch stuff, there's the quite usable, and then there's the rubbish at the bottom. And it's not necessarily dictated to by price, but this is the huge but. And if there's any young people out there thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I can tell you, get into a trade. Get into auto electrics or get into fitting of some sort, because the one thing, 15 million people can buy a really cheap inverter, but there's probably 10 who can wire it up properly. And so, and wire it up effectively so that it will last for a long time. That's the real skill base. And so all the cheap gear in the world doesn't make up for people who can't manage to screw in a cargo protection barrier without sticking a few tech screws through the outside of the truck, you know, or cutting through a wire. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that raises a couple of points. When you're bogged on the sand below the high water mark and the tide's coming in, you don't want your cheap and crappy recovery device to break, because you kind of need it to work there and then, and that's why you're going to use a Max Trax.
That's right, and you need it to work twice or 3 times or 4 times, and you know, usually when that situation is like that, you're going to be building a road there for a while to get out.
And the only thing that's more stressful than that is when you're 2 days out from civilization and your fridge is on the blink, and that means you've got warm beer. Like, that's a lot worse.
Look, funny story. And a long time ago, we were sponsored by a fridge company. When I say we, 4-wheel drive action was. They were making huge inroads because their fridges were good and they were cheap. And I had one in the back of Milo that I had to use for cooking and all the rest of it. This is one of those instances where, Roothy, if you want to be paid this month, you better use this product. Okay, no problem. I still had an angle behind the seat. That's just a by the by. This particular day, we were travelling through the Simo. It's fairly warm. We got bogged a few times, once on purpose to film it, and then, of course, straight afterwards, someone else got bogged for no reason. But anyway, hot day, all the rest of it. We get to Dalhousie, and there's 5 of us. I had all the food in the angle and all the beer for the team in the other fridge. The other fridge had stopped working. There was one car in the whole sort of compound there at Dalhousie. It wasn't a compound in those days. And so I walked over to the guy. I said, look, mate, I don't know if you got a few spare cold beers, because there's 8 of us over here and all the beer's warm. And he said, oh, you know, what's wrong? I said, oh, the fridge stuffed. It's just stopped. And he said, you wouldn't believe this. I'm a fridge mechanic. I thought, you've got to be kidding. Middle of the Simo, fridge mechanic. But he came over and he had a look and he took a panel off and he said, oh, I can't help you, mate. The circuit board's fried. And in the end, I think I swapped him, I don't know, probably 2 cartons of beer for 16 cold ones or something, you know, just to get us out of the strife. But yeah, you're right, mate. You know, nothing lets you down more than a piece of equipment in the middle of nowhere when it goes wrong. And at the end of the day, our lifestyle's all about the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. There you go. So many great stories, so many great ideas from Australia's most iconic 4-wheel driver. And just chatting with Roothy, it really has given me pause to think about, that the benefit of just heading out bush, disconnecting from all of your electronic gadgets and just spending some time out under the stars with some mates. The real benefit of that, the health benefits, the psychological benefits, and there's a lot of people who really need that. And I think that we could all benefit from just that a little bit more time out bush. I know I could. It's been a long time since I've been bush, quite tragically. But a cracking story, and it's fired me up to go out, to get out, plan our next camp. So yeah, I'll have to have a look at the diary and see when we can get out off-road the next time, because it has been a while between trips. That's it for today. Hopefully we will see you on the track someday. Bye.
4x4earth.com is used by over 200,000 people every month to find great tracks, organise trips, and find out how to better enjoy exploring the great outdoors. There's over 1,000 tracks and 300 campsites ready for you to explore. So check out 4x4earth.com today and sign up to get access to the track information, ask questions, and meet other 4x4 Earthers. Membership is completely free. If you're looking for a good route, check out 4x4earth.com today.